In Yemen, security officials say a suicide bomber attacked the government's security headquarters. This happened in Aden, and the attack sparked clashes between security forces and suspected terrorists. Officials say the attacker rammed the vehicle rigged with explosives into the entrance gate of the headquarters. It's still unclear how many people died as a result of the blast. Since that attack happened less than a day after Houthi rebels in Yemen fired a missile at Saudi Arabia's capital city. The Saudi defense system intercepted the missile near the airport in Riyadh. No one was injured, but it did prompt a Saudi airstrike on Sana'a in Yemen. A lot to talk about here, and with us this hour, John Defterios on the story. John is our emerging markets editor and has covered Saudi Arabia for many years, live for us in Abu Dhabi. John, good to have you with us. In this conflict, this ongoing conflict, is there a sense now that Saudi Arabia could be targeted more? Are the Houthis gaining sophistication and abilities here to strike Saudi Arabia?
I think less on sophistication, although there's some dispute, George, about the backing from Tehran and whether they're providing the missile technology that we saw launched against Riyadh. It was an audacious attempt, of course, to go after the Saudi capital. So, yes, indeed, it takes this conflict into a new realm. That missile attack was intercepted by a Patriot missile. This was disputed by Yemeni officials overnight, but there were no casualties and no real damage, although debris was spread east of the King Khalid International Airport. So it did indeed raise some alarm. I think we have to put it in the broader context of what's taking place in this proxy war with Yemen, with backing of Tehran. We have Saudi Arabia leading a coalition which has the UAE involved. The Crown Prince, since he took over in that position last spring, doubled down on the effort here to mark a line in the sand and also restrict the movements of Iran. That's the goal here, whether it's in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. We see the resignation of Saad Hariri, the prime minister of Lebanon, overnight. They are directly related. He's worried about his life and because of the influence of Iran on Lebanese affairs as well. In the bigger context of the Crown Prince, of course, he's 32 years old. He wants to take a very tough line against Iran. He's choosing the battlefield of Yemen, which has become a humanitarian crisis. But instead of backing down, he's pushing ahead. We had an off-the-record briefing with him 10 days ago at a major investment summit in Riyadh, and he made it very clear in that meeting and with other officials that I'm talking to in Riyadh that they don't intend to back off the pedal, but in fact push ahead with this proxy war, which is becoming quite nasty and something that escalated overnight with no fewer than 20 attacks, rocket attacks on Sana'a as a result of that attempt in Riyadh.
John, I'll ask you to stand by for a moment. There's another story we'd like your input on that we're following out of Saudi Arabia regarding the anti-corruption committee that King Salman has created. This committee, it's already cost several top ministers their jobs, and CNN has also learned multiple princes, ministers, and former ministers have been detained. So, John, this committee created to target corruption, but does it in effect go beyond that? Could this be a means to consolidate power as well?
I think that's part of the equation, George. Many eyebrows were raised because the anti-corruption committee that he formulated over the weekend came down like a hammer overnight. You mentioned the outlines of it. We're looking at least 11 princes. The most prominent is Prince Mitteb, who is the head of the National Guard and had a ministerial ranking. We had 4 sitting ministers overall, better than a dozen former ministers and extremely prominent businessmen, which I'll get to in a moment. But I think we should roll back the clock when the Crown Prince took that position, moving from Deputy Crown Prince into the Crown Prince's position. He signaled this back in May that he wanted to tackle it, and it's 6 months into the job, and he's doing so. Let's take a listen.
I assure you that no one involved in a corruption case will be spared, no matter if he is a prince or a minister. With enough evidence, anyone will be held accountable.
Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince. Now to the list here, George. Prince Walid bin Talal is a name that's being circulated widely. He's the chairman of Kingdom Holdings. We probably know him internationally as a man worth better than $20 billion, an investor in Apple, an investor in Twitter, an investor in News Corp, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, Citigroup, scores of others. His stock is down in trading on Sunday in Riyadh by better than 10%. Bakr bin Laden, this is the older brother of Osama bin Laden, running a huge construction group group in Saudi Arabia. Together with Prince Al-Walid, they're building the Kingdom Tower, which will be the tallest in the world, better than 1 kilometer high. Some question marks, of course, raised about financing in the future. Another prominent name for the international business community, Asif al-Assad, is the former Minister of Finance and Minister of State, somebody who took Saudi Arabia into the G20 a few years back and respected within the IMF World Bank community, the former Minister of Investment, another big trading family of Saudi Arabia, even an elderly billionaire, Saleh al-Kamel, that people don't know outside the Middle East, but very prominent into Saudi Arabia. So I would break this down into 4 categories, which I think sums up your point here, George. First and foremost, the Vision 2030 to overhaul the economy and move beyond oil, perhaps root out construction, modernize the economy. Getting women to drive is a big move in June 2018, but also a different interpretation of Islam. The corruption probe, but the last point that you were making, an ability to consolidate power. And I think underlining this is targeting those related to either directly by blood, but also in the business community to King Abdullah, who passed in 2015. This is a tribal society, and consolidating power is all part of the bill when we see a change at the top. King Salman and his Crown Prince son, 32-year-old Mohammed bin Salman, taking bold moves over the weekend.
And as he said in that clip that you played a moment ago, no one will be spared from this. John Defterios, live for us in Abu Dhabi, thank you so much for the reporting today. Back here in the United States,